Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. So this is my another vlog here in the Hoover Dam, and I would like to invite you guys to see this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification to notify you on my next video vlog, and please watch all the videos that I have on my YouTube channel. And this is a Hoover Dam experience. Thank you. say hey.
Was that he believed that someday, somehow, future civilizations would find it right here. And with no other